60,452. That's how many people showed up to Nebraska's spring game on April 27th, 2024. That's more than some actual regular season games for a lot of other teams across the country. But what if I told you that Nebraska's head coach Matt Rule was considering canceling the spring game this year? Not because of weather, not because of scheduling, but because of the transfer portal, and I think I agree with him. And Nebraska isn't alone. Texas head coach Steve Sarkisian has hinted about doing the same. And this isn't just about Nebraska or just about Texas. This is about something much bigger. Spring games might be in danger, not just for these two teams, but for all teams across the country. And that's just one symptom of deeper issues shaking the foundation of college football. Let's talk about it. Welcome to the Sports Corner on Choose Adventure Media. All right. So how did we get here? On February 1st, in a press conference, Matt Rule publicly said he was thinking about canceling Nebraska's spring game because it makes their players vulnerable to being poached by other programs. And he has a point. Last year, right after their spring game, Nebraska lost 3 of their key players to the transfer portal. That's a really tough pill to swallow, especially when you've got tens of thousands of fans packing the stadium, excited to see the future of their team, only for that future to transfer out a week later. Let's watch Matt Rule talk about possibly canceling the spring game this year.
Coach Troy Dannon said the other day that April 26th there will be something here. Are you able to say at this point whether or not there will be any form of scrimmage that day?
Yeah, I don't know that yet, but I'll be honest with you, I highly doubt it. And I think it's really fundamentally, I hate to say it like this, it's really because, last year we're one of the more televised. We were one of the more televised spring games, and I dealt with a lot of people offering our players a lot of opportunities after that. So to go out and bring in a bunch of new players and then showcase them for all the other schools to watch, that doesn't make a lot of sense to me. The word tampering doesn't exist anymore. It's just absolute free, open, common market. And so I don't necessarily want to open up to the outside world. I don't want these guys all being able to watch our guys and say, wow, he looks like a pretty good player. Let's go get him. But I don't know yet. I don't know anything. I thought it was important that, we at least started to broach that subject of it not being televised. Yet at the same time, I do want to show off our players in some way. So what exactly it'll be yet, I have not worried about anything other than recruiting right now, both the portal and into the 26 class. So now I have to kind of turn my attention to all those things.
Before we dive any deeper, I think it's important if we discuss the origins of the transfer portal. So before the transfer portal, it was a lot harder for players to transfer. There were even restrictions around which schools the players were allowed to transfer to. For example, a lot of the conference wouldn't even let you transfer to another school within the conference. The big thing, though, was that before the transfer portal, that player had to sit out for a year and they lost a year of eligibility due to transferring. Every college athlete is granted 4 years of eligibility whenever they go to college. Obviously, this can vary. For example, if the player gets a red shirt, that can add a 5th year. In 2020, if you were a college athlete, you were granted an extra year of eligibility due to the COVID-19 pandemic. However, pre-portal, let's say you transfer, then you only have 3 years of eligibility. This was obviously to deter transferring. There were, however, exceptions for hardships. For example, let's say a player is originally from the state of Florida and he goes to the University of Oregon to play football. And after his first year, he has a sick family member. And he wants to transfer home back to Florida, one of the schools in Florida, just to be closer to his family, help out with the sick family member. He could, in the old days, apply for a waiver and ask the NCAA, hey, can I please not have a year of eligibility and can I not sit out for a year because I'm transferring for reasons X, Y, and Z? Sometimes the NCAA would agree to it, sometimes not. And it wasn't impossible to transfer and not have success. For example, Cam Newton, Baker Mayfield, Kyler Murray, all are transfer players who then went on to win the Heisman Trophy and become #1 overall draft picks in the NFL draft. so it wasn't impossible to succeed in the old system. However, in October of 2018, the transfer portal was introduced to make transfers easier for players. Nowadays, players must inform their coach of their intention to enter the portal, and then they can only enter the portal during a specific transfer window. These are going to be between the semesters. A lot of times you'll see players announce their intentions on social media weeks before the transfer portal actually opens. Technically, they're not in the portal yet. Your name is not in the portal unless it is during one of those windows. The players have to fill out this paperwork, and then once they submit the paperwork, it usually actually takes a couple of hours for their name to appear in the portal. During the first 24 hours, players can remove their name and keep their scholarship and keep their roster spot if they are in the portal for less than 24 hours. Afterwards, there is no obligation for the coach to let that player back. So let's say after 18 hours, the player calms down, cools off, and decides to remove his name from the portal. He still has his roster spot. He's still guaranteed a place to play football. However, let's say it's 26 hours, then that means that player is no longer guaranteed a roster spot at his current school. And I think that's something that a lot of criticizers of the transfer portal may not realize. It's not this wild, wild west free market. Like the athletes are indeed risking something when they put their name in the portal. However, there is one more important note about the current transfer portal system. And that's what Matt Rule was talking about when he was discussing tampering. A player is only eligible to be contacted by other coaches, assistants, front office at other schools when their name is in the portal. If their name is not in the portal, that's called tampering. And that is kind of a rampant issue right now in college football, is that players don't have their name in the transfer portal, and they're getting Instagram DMs, they're getting texts from all these coaches across the country, getting offers, we'll pay you X amount of dollars to come play at our school, even though their name's not in the portal. And that's what Matt Rule is talking about, is that the players that transferred out after their spring game last year weren't in the portal. They fully intended to play at Nebraska. But when you get an Instagram DM saying that you can be paid $1 million more than you're being paid right now, why wouldn't you go? And I don't know if that's the actual dollar amount, but that is what some of these coaches report. Some of their star players are getting $3 million offers to go play at other schools. And tampering is a punishable offense currently. However, enforcement is weak due to lack of NCAA oversight. And I think that's the bigger issue with the transfer portal. It's not the actual transfer portal itself. It's just that the legislation and the oversight is not as strong as it should be. Tampering happens every day due to lack of consequences. This first starts with NCAA investigations are really slow. These can take years to occur, so usually by the time the penalties are actually handed out, the players have already graduated, the coaches or the assistant coaches or the offenders have already gone to another school or are in the NFL or are in a different league. So usually then the only person left to punish is actually the university when none of the offenders are left. An example of this is the University of Michigan. They got punished for a cheating scandal. Great documentary on Netflix about it. But by the time the NCAA actually investigated it and was ready to hand down a punishment, the head coach had gone off to the NFL and the assistant coach was already gone. So who was left to punish? The university with no one left who was actually a guilty party? That one doesn't necessarily make sense to me. So overall, I think the portal is great for the sport. I think it gives the players a lot of freedom to find the best opportunity for themselves. And at the end of the day, that's what college is about, is preparing yourself to become a professional. If a player thinks that going to a different school to develop or making more money in the current moment is better for their professional development, then they are entitled to that as any other college student is. I also strongly think that the transfer portal is overall a positive for coaches. Coaches can build stronger teams more quickly, especially after a down year. Take, for example, Florida State. 2023, undefeated. Should have made the college football playoff, but didn't for other reasons. In 2024, they had a down year. Usually, pre-transfer portal, if you had a down year, that was just kind of foreshadowing another at least 2 to 3 years of mediocrity, because you had to wait, because you had to hopefully land a solid recruiting class and then had to wait 2 to 3 years for that recruiting class to develop. Nowadays, rosters can be overturned overnight. And a lot of people look at that as a negative because obviously you can lose players. However, we also get stories like Indiana in 2024. In 2023, they were one of the worst teams in the Big Ten, and in 2024, they were competing for the Big Ten championship. Like, those are the stories that we love about college football, and the transfer portal helped make that happen. So really, the transfer portal has helped perpetuating our favorite parts about the sport. So overall, I think the transfer portal is a massive positive for not just college football, but college sports as a whole. I think it can be improved by more jurisdiction, more oversight, and just a better governing body to actually monitor that the transfer portal is working as intended. And there is hope for this on the horizon, and it's called the House versus NCAA settlement, which is expected to come down in April of this year. And that brings us to the real question: what do spring games actually mean for college football? Look, the reaction from fans to Matt Rule's comments was not great. The time between the national championship game in January and the start of the new season in late August/early September is a long and sad stretch for college football fans. The spring game is a rare bright spot in that time frame. It's a way to see the team in action and break up the boredom. And it's not just about football. Spring games are a really unique experience to college football. It's the one time your home field isn't hostile. There's no enemy, no one's hoping for the other team to fail. Everyone is just there to celebrate their team, to feel that connection, and to get excited about what's coming next. You get to see exciting new recruits that you've only read about or maybe watched YouTube videos of their highlight tapes. You get to see how new transfers gel with the other players and fit into your team's scheme. And if something good happens, everyone in the whole stadium is happy about it. I grew up going to the Florida Gator orange and blue spring games or watching them on TV. But I think the most special one for me was the year I got admitted to the University of Florida. I was admitted that February, and then I stepped into the swamp in April for the first time as a Gator student. And it wasn't just a game. It was really my first real taste of what it's like to be an admitted Gator student. I'm still getting goosebumps thinking about it, and that memory just plays all the time in my head like a scene from a movie. But at the same time, this is why fans are getting frustrated, is they see that with the transfer portal, NIL, and conference realignment, it feels like we're losing parts of what makes college football special. The moments, the traditions that make this sport different from the NFL. And then losing the spring game, that hurts. However, like I said, I personally don't think it's the transfer portal, NIL, and conference realignment that is making us lose those things. I think it's they're just not being instituted very well. And like I said, there's that House settlement in April that is really going to help establish and just give some more guidelines for all of this. I don't think it's actually NIL or the transfer portal or conference realignment that is causing people to feel this way, that we're kind of losing some of the traditions or the feelings that make college football so great. I think it's really in the way that they're being instituted. There's not a whole lot of oversight. There's not a whole lot of jurisdiction or legislation kind of providing more of a structure to these things. For example, let's look at the NFL's model. The NFL also has tampering. However, the NFL has an extremely high level of oversight and legislation and jurisdiction. For example, in 2023, the Miami Dolphins lost their first-round draft pick due to tampering. They were contacting Tom Brady while he was still under contract with the Bucs, and they were trying to basically get him to come to their team so then he could be a quarterback for them while he was still a player, and then try to give him a GM or a part owner kind of role in the organization. However, he was still under contract with the Bucs, so that is tampering. They were also trying to lure Sean Payton, who was a former head coach of the Saints, but he was retired. However, the Saints still technically had him under contract if he so chose to go back into coaching. So, since the Miami Dolphins were in contact with him, trying to basically get him to come out of retirement, that is tampering. So, as a result, there was a quick investigation, and the Miami Dolphins lost their first round draft pick. Which, just to put this into perspective, can you imagine if there was a punishment in college football where a team loses their top recruit? It would never happen, but can you imagine? There would be significantly less tampering if that were the case. And I think that's exactly what the sport needs. Not that exact example with punishment, but I think the sport needs faster investigations and more severe punishment that actually make these teams reconsider tampering. Here's the thing. College football is still tied to the academic calendar. At the end of the day, these programs are still attached to universities, their schools, which means players who want to transfer have to do so between semesters just like any other college student. And here's another example of why things need to change, and this just recently happened this past winter transfer portal window. Penn State's backup quarterback was named Bo Pribula, and he had a tough decision to make. Drew Aller, who was Penn State's current starter, was long expected, even before the season, to declare for the 2025 NFL Draft, meaning the starting spot would be for Bo Pribula after the season. However, in late December, in the middle of Penn State's playoff run, Drew Aller announced that he was going to be coming back to school in 2025. And this was a big shock. Drew Aller was playing very well. So a lot of people still think that Drew Aller should declare for the draft. However, with Aller returning, Pribula knew he wouldn't be the starter in 2025. So he had a choice. Either stay and help Penn State prepare for their playoff run or enter the transfer portal. And it's important to note that Bo Pribula is not like most backup quarterbacks that don't see the field or the fans don't even know their name. Bo Pribula had specific packages and plays and a very defined role on the offense as a mobile quarterback, slightly more mobile than Drew Aller. So he was actually important to the team's success. He wasn't just a depth player. Bo Pribula really tried to balance preparing with Penn State in the end of December to early January, help them prepare for their playoff run while also visiting other schools. Coach James Franklin was very vocal and really just wanted to compliment Bo Pribula about how he was such a team player and really trying to help his team. But in the end, he was struggling to balance attending practices and traveling to visit other schools. In early January, Bo Pribula transferred to the University of Missouri, and Penn State ended up losing in the semifinals to Notre Dame. This is very coulda, woulda, shoulda, but you can't help but wonder if Bo Pribula's presence, making one or two more plays, picking up a first down, or even scoring a touchdown, could have made a difference and helped win that game. So let me put this plainly. The current calendar has playoffs start in the middle of December, and that's about the same time that the winter transfer portal window opens. So that's open for a couple of weeks. And then the national championship game is in the middle of January now. And then in the spring semester, there's really organized team activities. It's not just workouts. There's practices where they're going over plays for the upcoming fall. And there's a lot of chemistry building and scheme learning and really valuable information that happens. So that was Bo Pribula's motivation for transferring when he did. If he didn't transfer in the winter portal, if he would have transferred in the spring portal window, he would have missed all those activities. So the problem is that you have the winter portal during the playoff run, this super valuable team activity during the spring. Then you have the spring game, which is the culmination of learning all those plays and all that team building that you did in the spring semester. And then you have another transfer portal window. Then you have the summer, which are basically just personal workouts, individual workouts, until a couple of weeks before school starts. And then that's when players report to camp. So for coaches, spring games are basically putting their players on display for other schools to steal after they've spent all this time team building, learning the scheme, learning the playbook, just for another team to come steal them. I think the best proposal to fix this is to follow the NFL model. And Andy Staples at On3 did a beautiful job of explaining this, but he is suggesting shifting the spring semester to focus just on those individual workouts that I mentioned that are currently in the summer. Then team practices, those team building, playbook learning, all that would happen after the spring transfer window. This means that players that are on playoff teams, they can stay through the whole playoff run because they don't have to worry about missing those team activities in the spring. They can stay with their team through the middle of January. They'll stay at their current school through the spring semester, just working out, getting better. Then in April, when the spring window opens, they can take all the time they need to go visit schools, talk to coaches, figure out what is the next best step for that player in their career. They can then transfer, and then during the summer, like the NFL has, the NFL calls them OTAs, organized team activities, then the players can have those team building, and you have those players that are going to be on your roster in the fall. You have them all summer, all fall, and it's ultimately best for the student athletes, and it takes a lot of stress off the coaches, because right now these coaches are balancing making these deep playoff runs, some of the biggest games in their careers, not just seasons, in their careers, career-defining games, as well as trying to recruit their own roster to stay, as well as trying to recruit other kids out of the portal, as well as trying to recruit high schoolers. I think overall for the sport, it would be so much better if we allow the spring semester to let these coaches focus on roster building. Ultimately, I think we would get better rosters if they have more time to focus on that. So, Bo Pribula, he could have stayed and focused on the playoff run, attended classes at Penn State and worked out with them in the spring. Then in April, he visits schools, he talks to new coaches, picks a new school, joins the organized team practices right away, and that's something that the current transfer model just doesn't allow. I'm definitely going to go into this in later videos. However, I just want to point out, college football will never truly be the NFL. They are two fundamentally different entities, two completely fundamentally different ideas even. College football's uniqueness comes from its pageantry and its traditions. For example, Texas and Texas A&M hadn't played for 10 years until this past season. Their rivalry was as heated as ever. Players still choose these schools for the same reasons that fans fall in love with them. I love the LaMichael James story. Maybe it's biased because I live in Oregon. LaMichael James, former running back for the Oregon Ducks, offers a great example. He went to high school and grew up in Texas, went to University of Oregon for football, then he played 4 years in the NFL. He played 2 years with the San Francisco 49ers and 2 years with the Miami Dolphins. After his playing days, he then opened up a restaurant chain called Killer Burger in Oregon, and it is the best burger joint in the world. The peanut butter pickle bacon burger is my favorite thing on earth, and if you're ever in Oregon, you need to check it out. Now, he has multiple locations and can even be seen bussing tables from time to time, and often talks to fans that recognize him about how much he loves Oregon and how much he fell in love with it coming from Texas, and that's why he decided to come back after his NFL career. So whatever happens, I just hope that after this House ruling in April, I hope that the legislation keeps creating environments where players can have these kind of long-lasting connections to these schools and regions that they love. And I don't think the transfer portal is going to rob that from us. If anything, I think it can help create more of those stories, because you don't just get one swing at finding the place that you'll fall in love with and spend the rest of your life in that area. There's also a financial problem with canceling spring games. So spring games aren't just about football. They're also a huge deal for the local economy. For a lot of college towns, the 6 or 7 home games in the fall bring in millions for restaurants, hotels, and local businesses. Spring games help fill that gap from, the end of the previous season to the next season, even if it's just a little bit. I mean, 60,000 people going to Lincoln, Nebraska for a spring game, that has to provide a huge boost to the local economy. And while it may not seem like a lot on paper, a lot of these college towns are teeny tiny little towns that are completely reliant on these revenue generating Saturdays in the fall. This was especially evident to me when I was in Gainesville during the pandemic. The community was hurting not having the same environment for those 7 Saturdays. Even if it was just one season, those 7 Saturdays are critical to the success of these communities. Like, I don't think Gainesville could have survived another season without a complete and 100% fans in attendance football season. Plus, spring games are accessible. Tickets cost anywhere between $5 to $30, and in some cases, like the Florida Gator games growing up, they were free. Compare that to regular season games, which are just going up and up and up in price. They've skyrocketed over recent years. So it's very rare now that the average family can actually afford to go to a game in the fall. Spring games are a great way to help fans, young and old, fall in love with the school instead of just going to school there. We need to make sure that fans can access these games so then we continue growing the fan base and ultimately keep feeding what makes college football so great, and that's the fans and the passion that the fans have. Canceling spring games, that's not just a football problem, it's an economic one as well. So where does this all lead? If Nebraska and Texas cancel their spring games, other programs might follow. And if they do, that could change the recruiting landscape, player development, and the fan experience in ways we can't even predict yet. And until changes are made to the college football calendar around transfer portal windows, I really think schools should consider canceling their spring games. I think this is really the leverage that these schools need to take to cause change and to motivate the NCAA to have an improved oversight and jurisdiction for transfer portal and NIL. I don't want spring games to be canceled. Let me make that very clear. However, I don't blame coaches for not wanting to have a spring game because of how easy it is for tampering to occur. I don't want college football to be a complete wild, wild west, open free market. And I think the only way, or the fastest way for us to get the rules in place so that doesn't happen and that isn't happening, is by canceling stuff like spring games. And this is all part of a bigger conversation about college football's structure. And the House versus NCAA settlement in April is expected to bring more structure and oversight. And the specific example I want to bring up is there will essentially be a salary cap of 22% of the average power conference athletic media rights, ticket sales, and sponsorship revenue. So let me break that down a little bit. By power conferences, they mean the Big Four, Big 10, Big 12, ACC, and SEC. So 22% of the average media rights of the teams in those 4 conferences, add in ticket sales and sponsorship revenue, that will be the salary cap for these teams. And the reason I want to bring this up is because there's going to be quite a robust governing body to ensure that the salary cap is adhered to. And this is really exciting to me because since NIL was established in 2021, there's been no oversight. So this sets the groundwork for broader regulation across college sports. And I think that would really lay the groundwork for a governing body and oversight for the transfer portal. But here's what I hope for the most. Whatever changes happen, they protect the things that make college football great. The pageantry, the traditions, the connection between fans and their teams. And one of those traditions are spring games. So, what do you think? Is canceling spring games a necessary step in the modern era of college football? Or is it just another sign of the sport losing what makes it special? Comment below. I want to hear your take. And if you're as passionate about college football as I am, hit that like button, subscribe, and turn on notifications so you don't miss the next deep dive. We've got a lot more to talk about when it comes to the future of college football. See you next time on the Sports Corner.